Hello and welcome to the Progressive Spectrum Super Tuesday Special. A Biden, Bernie, and Warren supporter walk onto a podcast and we talk for an hour. Hello and welcome to Stand Up. This is a very special, different kind of episode, a experiment, if you will, a pilot, if you will, where I reach out to listeners of the show that I've known for a long time, that I trust, who I think are really intelligent, but yet who have different ideas on many of the issues that we talk about, and ask them to be my expert guests, because they're just as good as any of the expert guests that I normally talk to. Chris, AKA Chum, is in Chicago. Help me set this up. Cornell is in Austin, Texas, and Bill is, of course, in D.C. All right, here's our conversation about Chris Matthews, coronavirus, and, of course, the Democratic primary campaign. I am recording, and this is the Stand Up Smart Listener show, because I used to talk to all these guys at SiriusXM, and I thought I'd get them all together here and try to do a conversation, have a conversation about everything that's going on, little experiment. I've got Cornell in Texas. I've got the Chum in Chicago, and I've got Bill B. He is in D.C., and let us start. Does anybody want to introduce themselves in any way? You want to just get right into this? Do you guys even want to use last names, or do you not want to be identified? Do we want to use Twitters?
Yes, Twitters.
I'm fine with whatever, man. I don't care. I say stuff all over the place, and my name is right there on my tag. I do not care.
Yeah, I'll keep semi-anonymity.
Semi-anonymity. Twitter,
yeah.
It's at RenaissanceXM. That's Cornell. You've got at Bill B. DC. And Chum, what is your Twitter? Bill B.
At
in DC.
Sociable.
Bill B. in DC. And you are what, Chum?
At Sociable Heine. So I'm kind of quasi-anonymous.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. My real name's Chris Heine. You can see my LinkedIn profile on my Twitter. All
right. So Chum, you're just going to plug your LinkedIn?
No, I'm just saying I'm a real person with a real name and real bills to pay. And that is, you can learn all about me on my LinkedIn if you want to.
All right. Let's get to it. The conversation. First of all, guys, let's just talk before we talk about the Super Tuesday and the presidential campaign. I want to get everybody's take on, real quick, least important thing, but just fun because it was just happening. Chris Matthews is out at MSNBC. Bill, your reaction?
It's nothing so much as Chris Matthews as making himself the biggest story on the evening of the biggest Democratic primary in modern history. It is so Chris Matthews to make himself the middle of it. I think and by the way, I love it that he got outlasted by Elizabeth Warren. You couldn't hope for better.
Cornell, I said that I'm glad that Chris Matthews is gone, and I hope that they will replace him with a woman of color. Am I patronizing people of color? You are a black person, so you get to answer that one.
You absolutely are patronizing people of color, and that's fine. We're okay being patronized. And what I was going to say in my response was, ha! But, you'd have to be a real...
That's not bad.
You'd have to be a Chris Matthews watcher to actually get that joke.
I got that. Was good. Again, please. Nailed it.
I mean, honestly, I think it's time. And I think we're also going to find out pretty quickly that it's not just that, Chris got some really, divine insight. We're going to find out something else happened here pretty quickly. But yeah. For whatever reason, legal or illegal, it was time for him to do something else.
But seriously, do we think that it matters the kind of demographic of the anchor and the fact that there aren't a lot of people of color anchoring shows, much less women?
Oh, hell yeah! I mean,
okay.
I would absolutely say that matters. And there are so many really intelligent, sharp, funny. Even aggressive. I mean, one of the reasons that people really like Chris is that he would go after you. He was not worried about, what's this going to look like? If he thought he had something that he needed to get from you, he was going to go after you. And so that's why people appreciated it. It didn't really matter up to a certain point, what party you're a part of. If he thought you were like hiding, if he thought you were not being straight, he would go after you. And so that's a service. But there are, I think, plenty of people of color, women of color, who are just as capable of doing that. And in doing that could also provide, a perspective that's outside of the hard scrabble, Pennsylvania neighborhood, which Chris loves to talk about every single minute of the show.
Can we hear that Chris Matthews laugh one more time before I go to Chum? Oh my God, that's good. Chum, any thoughts on Chris Matthews and corporate media? You probably want to launch into something.
No, I mean, I hate to see him go. It's just real sad day for all of us involved, I think. I kind of came to him. I came to Chris Matthews from the right. He was the OG Bill O'Reilly guy back in the day, and then, like Cornell said, was drawn to Chris Matthews through my brief time in MSNBC world because of his kind of ability to punch and seemed like a fighter. But as I've grown into my leftism here, it just seems like everything was the corporate line, and then comments as of late obviously were very much inappropriate. When I heard that he was fired, though, or well, I shouldn't say that he's fired. As he made his departure tonight, it seems that I was surprised by that. I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought he was just going to be hanging around.
All right, well, we'll see what happens with that. Let's move on to and dispense of another really important topic before we get to the campaign, guys, which is coronavirus. Everybody's panicking. Everybody's freaking out. Bill, how are you and your family dealing with it in D.C.? Have you bought extra supplies?
No, none. And basically all we're really doing is telling my kid to wash his hands a little bit more often. I think we're in one of those positions where this should not be a crisis, but the Trump administration is handling it so ineptly and so badly that they're going to turn it into one. And it's unfortunate because shouldn't be that big of a deal. But I think we're going to see a pretty good economic hit because of it. And it's entirely self-inflicted. And I think it's actually going to have political repercussions.
Come on. You're making me defend the administration. Are you going to blame Trump and the administration? It's a virus. It started in China. It's gone all over. Are you going to blame Trump for, what's happened in Italy?
Well, actually, I am, because part of the thing that Trump did when he came into the White House was get rid of the pandemic team that the Obama administration had built up over years. That was great. And that might have seen this coming. So, yeah, in part, they are at blame for that. And on top of that, what they're doing is the president is saying one thing. He's politicizing it. He's saying it's not a big deal. They're saying that it's a Democratic hoax. They are then turning around and saying, well, maybe it's going to turn into something, but who knows? And when you have an ununified message, a disunified message, people don't trust the government, and that's when people panic and do really stupid things in face of an illness.
Okay. Chum, what do you think about coronavirus? How are you dealing with your family?
We're doing the washing hands thing, not doing the mask. We're not buying into the hype, trying to be realists of it. But again, I agree with Bill. I come from an optics kind of understanding of the political world, and that optics is everything. And I'm sure from all of us, from when the Trump administration started undercutting and undergirding the truth years ago, we knew that when this time would come, then we'd be in real, dire straits, because we'd be married up to different realities. And to have the president of the United States at political rallies and his sons and, who are extensions of their administration, saying things like it's a hoax and that, that they're making fun of people dying, that's really, really alarming stuff, not because it's being said, but because so many people in Cult 45 are just kind of going along with it.
Cult 45. Cornell, you're currently wearing a mask. Seems a little overkill.
I'm not, actually. And yeah, it's actually interesting you asked, because my partner, she actually is in the medical field. She's actually getting her doctorate in acupuncture and Oriental medicine. So they actually got like medical schools and medical institutions. They got a heads up about the CDC press conference before it actually happened. She gave me a call and said, "Hey, I don't know if you all are doing. We were actually supposed to be doing an event outside. We, where I work, we had an event outside at a university where there's going to be a lot of kids, and so she was actually worried. She's like, "Hey, we just heard the CDC is going to actually take this up to the next level. I don't know if you're also going to do your event, but you should really consider that." And I passed it on to my general manager, and then I think an hour or two later, CDC had the press conference. I was like, "Okay, here it is." And so, yeah, I mean, we're washing our hands. We're being, precautious, but really in the end, yeah, I agree with Bill. This will actually be a much worse situation because simple ways that we as a country could have been more prepared, those people in power, like the president, decided, oh, that's not a big deal. We don't need to worry about it until, oh, crap, now we have to worry about it. And you have people in Washington dying. And we are now hearing there have likely been cases that have been kind of festering for weeks that people hadn't really known about it or really couldn't be reported. And it's in part because the CDC didn't send out kits that worked at first. And like as far as people to be able to test. And then they restricted the ability for some people to get tested. So, when you've got a agency whose job is supposed to be to actually control disease and they don't have the money they need to control disease, simple diseases become potential pandemics, and it's that simple.
So
I'm
not convinced that they're handling these test kits any better than your local police department's handling a rape kit. So.
Oh wow!
No, man, well, no, and that's kind of my point. I mean, the CDC they originally sent out a set of kits, and they didn't work. They had to actually do some fixes, and I guess they're now going to be getting out new kits. But it's like, okay, we're already weeks behind. Who knows? At least weeks behind, and with the cases in Washington, it went from 1 to 2, and now I think 6 people in Washington died, and they're all kind of in an area. Who knows how many people have gone through that area and have gone to other places. Is anybody like me when you be a much bigger thing
when you find out that who died and you find out they're like 70 and 80 and vulnerable? You're like, whew. Wasn't until it's somebody who's 45, and then we're like, oh crap. So I'm the only one here who has like bought extra food and toilet paper and stuff. Is that right, Bill?
Oh God, you're prepping.
A little bit.
I mean, you've kind of got a prepper beard going on anyway, so I guess it kind of makes sense.
You have a prepper beard?
Yeah.
I'd be lying to say I hadn't thought about it. We were at Costco this weekend and didn't end up with anything other than like 19 things of bleach for the toilet. So,
all right. Okay. Well, and then one more point on that. I mean, how much, as we head into the conversation now about the presidential campaign and Super Tuesday and the candidates that are remaining, how much does this affect the election? How much does this affect the economy? Because, one of the points I'll make when we start talking about the election is polling I don't really think at all about polling, hardly at all, when it's March 2nd. I think about polling in October when you can take a good look at the economy. And if there is still a pandemic and it's growing, or, there's a natural disaster, an earthquake, wildfires that are being handled poorly, much less, God forbid, a terrorist attack or some horrific shooting. It feels like it really only matters what the economy looks like in October. Bill, how much does this pandemic affect the presidential campaign and the economy?
Well, I think what it does is it underlines Trump's incompetence, right? And it gets voters looking at who in the race is viable, who looks like they're very well qualified to deal with this sort of situation. And I got to say, I can't see how that hurts Biden. I think it helps him. Now, granted, we're talking about marginal cases here, right? This is on the edge of where things matter. But, we're talking about a race where somebody might win this race on the Democratic side by 25 delegates. It's going to be tight. It's going to be really close. And if this is one of those rare cases where something like this, where competency becomes a really big deal and where voters are looking at the president being super incompetent, when they're looking at who's going to replace them, they're going to be going for the other thing. They're not going to necessarily want to take more of a chance on someone that they're not sure of.
Right. What do you guys think, Cornell, Chum, about the effect that the pandemic, that the coronavirus will have on the election? Chum?
I think that if I was a political strategist, I would be really weaving this narrative together about how we're looking at our our medical system and the lack of coverage for everybody, and how that could be affected by how we're, prepared for something like this, and really the disastrous consequences that can have. And we're going to have some really hard choices kind of in the future of, when we say we're not going to let people die in the streets, like, do we really mean that? And is capitalism going to come to the rescue? Hope so, but I think if I was really now looking to run a Democratic primary and then even a general election, I would indict that entire system that has us to this point. And to Bill's point, people are going to be looking for that change candidate.
Yeah, I saw this quote today, Cornell. A point that can't be made enough is that once tests become available, people with symptoms may not want to get tested, fearing massive medical bills. This is the danger of a system with millions of people who are uninsured or underinsured. How much does the pandemic, the coronavirus scare, whether it gets worse or not, affect the election, Cornell?
I mean, I think it could affect the election in so many ways. I mean, all the ways that Bill and Chum have already mentioned. But yeah, I also think the economy. I also, as somebody like I work and like my passion is civic engagement and civic empowerment. So I was actually thinking earlier today, I'm like, you know what? I'm glad that Super Tuesday is tomorrow, because if it were like in maybe 2 months, who knows where the coronavirus is going to be and how that might actually affect turnout. And I'm actually worried to be like, wait, I don't know if I want to be out in all these public places, especially if I don't, Washington's not going tomorrow, but what if Washington's primary was tomorrow? That turnout would be much lower, I think, because they're like, wait, we got 6 people who've died of coronavirus and we don't know everything yet. And I could see people freaking out. So like, I'm actually looking at not only the economic impact, because there will be, it's already happened. And then there's going to be more, because when you've got countries shutting down schools and you've got like international travel restricted, you're going to have economic impact. So that's only going to get worse. And then as it grows, especially in the United States, it's been growing in a bunch of other places, but as they often say, when, the United States gets a cold, like the world gets the flu. So, once it starts to grow in the United States, it's going to be a thing. So I think the coronavirus, depending on how it moves, it could become a thing about leadership. It could become a thing about healthcare. It could become a thing about systems of just like democracy, and whether or not the people who are like actually, doing their roles, whether it be state government or federal government, do they actually know what the hell they're doing?
Yeah.
And then, people turning out. It could affect the election on a whole bunch of levels, depending on which way it goes.
When you're talking, it just made me think about that, whether it's, I think we could probably all agree at this point, it's either going to be Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders will be the nominee. And if there is a debate, and we could talk about whether or not Trump would ever show up for a debate, you could see the line, or you could see the commercial, something about when, the coronavirus was gripping Americans with fear, Donald Trump was tweeting insults about whatever.
Right, Pete. One thing about that's interesting is that in the commercial real estate business right now, all these multinational companies are giving the risk management people are coming to people like me, sitting us down and talking about the coronavirus and what it's likely to do to the economy. Now, that's kind of a big deal for Trump, because these are people, a lot of people in my industry, a lot of commercial real estate style industries would kind of tend to support him. And right now, what they're hearing from their own industry is these guys are awful and they don't know what the hell they're doing. So like there's another side of this about the effects that I think you're going to see money that would normally have either sat on the sidelines or would have gone to Trump go the other way, if it's Biden especially.
I have a hard time believing that, people in business and real estate that support Trump are going to be turned off by his handling of this.
If they're losing money, they'll be incredibly turned off.
Yeah. And here's the thing. They won't necessarily, they won't say, oh, Trump's so bad. They'll say, hey, these bad things are happening to my bank account, and this is the guy in charge. So it won't necessarily be personally about Trump. It'll be like, okay, here's the guy in charge, and I got to blame somebody because I'm losing money. Who can I blame? The easiest target is going to be the person in charge, and that'll be Trump.
Well, remember too that these folks are highly educated suburban white people. they're already on when it comes to social questions that don't involve things that cost them money. They're already against Trump anyway. They're cool about a lot of things that we are cool about.
Right. They're socially liberal, but they only care about their 401k and their property and get capital gains taxes. And as soon as that
take away the
starts
401k, their political commitment changes.
Well, the market's bounced back today. Don't you wish you got in last Friday?
I stay out of the market. Then I don't have to worry about it.
That's a good call. Good call. Really?
Yeah, I did, because it's historically accurate that, these things are just going to keep going until it all blows up. It might as well just kind of keep playing. I'm hedging my bets, folks. What can I say? I've got my doomsday prepping going, and then I'm also playing market for.
You really don't have your doomsday prep. You only bought bleach. It's a weird choice of all.
It's a short time after doomsday that we're all going to be alive.
Krugerrands and Purell, baby. Krugerrands and Purell. That's what you need.
Yeah. I will say, though, don't underestimate the amount of people that are still performatively and out in their circles for Trump. But when it comes time to get behind the lever or get behind the curtain and pull the lever, they might just be the one person. Okay, well, I'll put mine in another direction, but I'll go back towards being my Trump sycophant afterwards.
All right, let's dispense of Mike Bloomberg. Cornell, your thoughts on Mike Bloomberg? And he's up. He's on the ballot, right? Super Tuesday. What are your thoughts about him overall?
My thoughts about him are, he's a rich white guy, and I mean, granted, that's kind of funny because to even be able to run for president, you kind of have to be a rich white guy. I don't care where your views are. I mean, Bernie is as radical as he is. He's got like 3 homes. So like you kind of have to be a rich white guy to run. So I don't hold that against Mike Bloomberg. What I do hold against Mike Bloomberg is he did some really awful things as mayor. He did some other good things too, but he never answered really for those really crappy things he did as mayor until he's running for president. And even now he's like, I kind of regret that. And, shoot, next question. And for me, like as somebody that has progressive views, I honestly, when he first got in, I was hoping that he wasn't really going to take it terribly seriously. And he was just really in it to snipe at Trump. And I'm like, man, if you can use your money and set up offices so that whoever actually gets a nomination can use those offices, and you're just using your money to just troll and absolutely poke at Trump the whole time, I'm like, that would be an amazing use of money. And then he decided, I'm going to be a real candidate. And I'm like, that's not going to work, man. Like, you're not going to do that. You're not going to be a real candidate. And, that first debate absolutely showed it. And he didn't really do much better. I mean, I guess he couldn't have done any worse than in the first debate. So just showing up and being quiet, he would have done better. But no, he didn't really do much for himself in the second debate. And I'm just like, dude, just be quiet, open up your offices, give the Democratic Party money, and just do whatever you can to beat Trump, because you're not going to get it done.
My favorite part was when Elizabeth Warren hit Michael Bloomberg with his own fists like a little baby.
That was
amazing. That's part of the campaign. Chum, any thoughts on Bloomberg? Let's dispense on him quickly.
Sorry. The whole notion of a billionaire to me is a systemic failure. Million seconds. We've heard the analogy that a million seconds is like 11 days, and a billion seconds is 37 years, of time. And so like the scale of money that we're talking about here is off the charts. And I don't think that you can get to that type of dollar without exploiting people along the way. And so that's kind of my general assessment of the thing. That being said, you could totally tell why the candidates wanted him to join the debate stage, because he's, change the rules for him all you want. But that was definitely to their advantage to get him out there and speaking. I don't think that what he's doing now is impressing anybody beyond what if he would have put $1 million into every district in the country to elect state, local, like if we're talking about a ground game and all that sort of stuff. So it just really turns like this is a vanity project. The billboards with him comparing about like, I'm a golfer, and it's funny, haha, kind of, but Donald Trump cheats at golf. Bill Bloomberg doesn't, or Mike Bloomberg. See, I don't even care. But Bloomberg doesn't.
The hell's Bill is his brother, I think.
That doesn't resonate. Who does that resonate to? Like, the people golfing, right? That's not people needing to pay their medical bills and stuff like that. It's just, it seems like such a vanity play.
Bill B, DC, Mike Bloomberg.
I think that an effective, moderate billionaire autocrat is probably more corrupting of the system than an ineffective, radical autocrat billionaire in the White House. I think he'd actually do more damage in the long run than Trump did. And I didn't used to think this, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And I think Bloomberg would be, in effect, the sort of final victory of oligarchy running our politics. And that's part of the problem with our politics, is that we've gone away from our politics being political. Everybody's talking about inequality or feeling the inequality building and reacting to it in different ways that are effectively radical. And Bloomberg winning the presidency would be a pretty radical thing in a bad way. And I don't think that most people have really thought that through.
All right, let's talk about...
It'd be ratchet effect in action.
Mm-hmm.
The what effect?
The ratchet effect. Essentially, it's showing you how bad, Trump, and it appeals to these certain things, and then it moves back towards a sense of stability, and essentially that's
it locks in all
moving the needle.
Trump
it's
did.
locking us back more and more towards authoritarianism and oligarchy.
Ratchet effect. Okay, so tomorrow is Super Tuesday, and we're about to find out a lot. So it's all the speculation today. Maybe it's not worth a lot as I think about it, talking about the horse race and so on. But still, it's worth discussing for sure because of the disparities in between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders in terms of their records, their policies, as well as how they match up against Donald Trump. So we are all kind of all over the place here. We're all very progressive people, I think it's fair to say. But Bill, why don't you get us started? Why do you think that I guess Joe Biden has a better shot of beating Donald Trump than Bernie Sanders does?
Because people have to travel less of a distance to vote for Joe Biden. Moderates, even a lot of liberals. I mean, I'm a pretty liberal guy, but I know that people in the Trump people I know, even, or the people, the disaffected people I know from the last election, blue collar folks that I know. I mean, I'm in a sort of world where I'm actually dealing with a much wider spectrum of class spectrum than most people do because of the business I'm in and because of where I am and where I go. And what I find is that people have a visceral reaction against Bernie, which may or may not be fair, but they do, that Bernie is some sort of radical. And I think that's been shown by the fact that Bernie hasn't changed in any of these primaries. The electorate has not changed that has voted for him. He's benefited from a split field, but he hasn't added any new voters to his coalition at all. And he hasn't added any new voters into any of the Democratic primaries. You're not seeing a wave of new people come in. And Bernie, given his politics, needs to do that to win a general election. Joe, and by the way, if you look, you see a lot of talk that Bernie looks better than Biden in the head-to-heads. That's actually like one or two polls. Quinnipiac, which is a shitty poll anyway, and one or two others. If you look at a broader spectrum of polling, Biden is in better position. Now, I don't think anybody's a shoo-in. I think Biden has his weaknesses. We're talking about a bunch of flawed candidates here, honestly. But politically, Biden is much closer to the center of mass of the electorate to the left of, Bill Kristol than any other Democratic candidate, and that's viable. And I think that I think Biden is the safer choice. He's definitely not a shoo-in. I think Trump's got a 60% chance of getting reelected. But I think with Bernie, he probably has an 80% chance. And I'll vote for either one. I'll support either one. I'll put my money behind either one. But I think the smarter bet is on Biden.
Cornell?
Yeah, it's interesting. I can absolutely relate, and I understand the reasoning behind everything that Bill just said. And I think it's great that you have all three of us here because I have a candidate. I'm voting tomorrow. I'm in Texas, and our primary is tomorrow. So I've got somebody I'm going to be voting for. But for me, I'm not convinced that it's a two-person horse race yet. And I say that because, I get all of the things that say, oh, well, these are the only two viable people. But I mean, if you've been around politics long enough, you've seen really crazy stuff happen. And we've got even with all the people who've dropped out, I think actually to an extent, all the people who dropped out today, Pete and then Amy, I think and also Tom Steyer also dropped out today. So with those people that dropped out today, I don't think their people are going to be as much in lanes as everybody thinks they are. And I think those votes could go to any number of places. I don't think it's just going to be Biden or Bernie.
Why don't you say you don't want to say who you're voting for?
Oh, no, I'll say the person I'm voting for is Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, I should have brought her up. I mean, why hasn't she done better, Cornell?
It's really
she's
hard
a lady.
for me.
Moving on.
It's really hard. It's hard for me to point out. I would say honestly, I think it matters that she's a woman, and let's just be real honest. I mean, let's just look at the fact that the most qualified presidential candidate in modern history, Hillary Clinton, ran twice, got beat twice. Now, she just ran into kind of a buzzsaw of Barack Obama, and I get it. And I was a part of that, and I understand that. But, to lose to Trump, and I get that she made a number of mistakes. I get it. But plenty of other campaigns run by men have made worse mistakes have still won. But she made a few mistakes, and it's like, oh, look what she did. And so I don't think you can overstate the fact that Elizabeth Warren is a woman, and she's probably the most intelligent person in the field. She actually has answers to questions. Now, she doesn't have the best answers, but she does have an answer, and she can't say, "Hey, here's why I think this is to be true." Not just, "Hey, we'll get this done." But like, "Hey, here are my numbers. Yeah. You may not like my numbers, but here's the evidence behind what I'm telling you we need to try to do." And so for that, and also the reasons that, I feel like longer than everybody else, she recognized that there are real importance to race in the issues some of the issues we're facing. Reasons why I think, Julian Castro, became her main surrogate after he dropped out. It's like, I was doing this and I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to support the person who's doing maybe as much as I am and who recognizes the same issues that I do. And so that's why I'm voting for Elizabeth Warren. But I think overall, people need to honestly vote for who represents them best. And I say that because all the conversation saying, oh, we need to get behind Bernie or Biden, I'm like, no, you need to vote for who you want to vote for. And here's why. Because if the people at the top see the support other people are getting, they're going to be like, okay, we got to do something to better our campaign to attract those folks. But if everybody just starts coalescing around two people, we're not going to get those two candidates to be as good as they need to be. And I want the best candidates possible running against Trump. I don't care their name. I just want them to be as prepared as possible to beat Trump. And I think the best way that happens is people really voting for who they care about, so that the people at the top can see where the support is and what they need to do to get that support.
Bill, is Cornell wasting his vote on Elizabeth Warren tomorrow? Why did?
No, not at all. I mean, here is a not unlikely scenario. Biden and Bernie both end up with 1,600 delegates, and neither one has enough leverage with the superdelegates. Biden probably does, but doesn't want to win with the superdelegates. And Bernie has no leverage with superdelegates. He can't get over the top. But Elizabeth Warren has 300 delegates to play with, right? You could very easily see a scenario where Elizabeth Warren is the unity candidate between Bernie and Biden. I could see that absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at 538,
what does that mean?
And
the unity.
I've been talking to people in D.C. A contested convention is very likely at this point. And if you're Elizabeth Warren, you're in a position where you could be the kingmaker, and I think that'd be great. I mean, to be honest with you, Warren was my first pick. Is
that right?
I don't think she's viable anymore, which is why I'm not voting for her. But as a unity candidate down the road, she could actually unite both sides. And dear God, I mean, she destroyed both Michael Bloomberg and Chris Matthews. Give that woman the pride. Shit, that doesn't make me presidential.
All right, Chum, you're a Bernie bro. Is that insulting?
Yes, it's terrible.
I'm a Bernie guy.
I'm not offended by it.
I've been a Bernie guy.
My wife and I almost came. Yeah, we almost came to blows tonight over pizza because she was asking me a question. She was like, "So let's compare these two people on social media. One guy is like this. Another guy is exactly the same. One guy gives me Bernie bro vibes. I don't know why." Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk policy or something. I was also a Warren guy.
Is that right?
Going into this one. Yeah.
Right.
Just because of the same things. I was with Bernie, obviously in 2016. I came across Bernie with him doing brunch with Bernie on Tom Hartman's show way back in the day.
Yeah, I think that's where I first heard him too. And then I stole him from Tom Hartman.
Yeah. And then your show, obviously. And like Bernie was basically the person chirping to my conservative, mildly, I'm socially liberal, financially conservative person, and really got me going towards this direction. And so I think the critique is kind of him being in the same spot for his whole time and not really passing legislation or whatever. Or I understand that critique, but at the same time, sometimes the quickest way to find back to where you're going is by turning around and going back to the person that's back at the trailhead saying, "Yo, we shouldn't have split, Reaganomics and that sort of thing way back then." And he's always.
Hold on one second.
What?
You mentioned he didn't pass any legislation, and Cornell, you tweeted about that today. And so I actually don't understand why that matters so much. Like, I understand why he didn't pass any legislation, because he's not a corporate asshole, because he wanted to do things that put people over profits, and most of Congress never was going to allow that. I don't care that he didn't pass a lot of legislation. The look on Bill's face, because I can see it, is smug. It's condescending.
Yeah.
And
adorable.
Yeah.
Cornell?
Chum gets a beer in D.C.
Yeah, so Bill, go ahead. You go, please.
I mean, Bernie's votes vis-a-vis guns were not great.
He lives in Vermont. Come on.
So what? I mean,
he's voting for the gun owners of Vermont. He's voting for hunters in Vermont. That type of gun stuff.
But if you live by moral superiority, you need to die by moral superiority.
He's been right on guns in the last 15 years.
Doesn't he have a death
but that's
rating
fine.
with the NRA?
But he is super judgmental of other people's politics, and more importantly, and I'm not saying Chum, but his harder fan base is incredibly and insanely judgmental of other people's politics. So if his movement is going to be fueled by that, you gotta live by the sword, you die by the sword.
And I can't believe you're going on the guns one. You're not winning me over.
I got to tell you, in Washington D.C., if you talk to black voters, it's a thing they remember very, very well.
Yeah, and
Really?
Pete, I'm sorry, when you've been in the Senate for 30 years, and just 5 years ago you realized that there were racist lending policies going on. 5 years ago, Pete, he's been in the Senate for 30 years. How can you be in the Senate for 30 years and not understand that there's racism in lending? Come on.
No, that's
what's the context in that?
But what's
I don't know. I'm not aware of that, so I want to get learned up on. I trust you, Cornell. So what should I look for with that story?
Well, no. So I mean, I cannot remember where it was, but he was interviewed by somebody, and he actually said, I mean, it was funny because it sounded, and I'm not trying to make the Trump Bernie comparison thing here, but it sounded so much like Trump saying, "Who knew healthcare was so complicated?" It's like, bro, everybody and their mama knew that healthcare was really complicated. How did you not know? And that's how it felt when Bernie was saying to somebody in an interview, like, I didn't realize until like about 5 years ago, I think when he was getting ready to run for president, he didn't realize how racist lending practices were. And I'm just like, and here's the thing, I don't necessarily blame him completely, because, I mean, when you live in a state like Vermont, you're not really going to be coming up against a whole bunch of racist lending practices. You may come up against more classist lending practices, and I get that's where his base is, but that's kind of the problem. It's like, hey,
let me try to push back. Let me try. I don't know what you're talking about with the lending practice thing necessarily, but wasn't Bernie Sanders on the right side of the civil rights movement in the late 1960s?
Sorry.
No. And here's why I'll say no.
And he was on the right side in the Civil War in the 1860s. I think we should not forget.
He was on the right side when the asteroid struck with the mammals and not the dinosaurs.
This is why I'll say he wasn't on the right side. And I'll say he wasn't on the right side because and he's been consistent. You talked about being consistent. He's been consistent on this. He has consistently said that he thought the civil rights movement was more about than race.
Class
and
than
I'm
race.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry, like, bro, if you thought that people were getting their heads in at the Edmund Pettus Bridge because they were poor, then you don't understand what the hell you're talking about.
That seems to be the rap on him, Chum. And I've heard this from other people as well, that Bernie Sanders is a class warrior, and he's not. He cares more about economic class strata than he does understand and care about white supremacy and how this country is founded and still a white supremacist. Have you thought about the race issue with Bernie Sanders yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, any person, especially of, my complexion, that's going to say that they've got the race question all figured out is lying. And, this is just a constant learning process and listening process. And
what is your complexion, by the way? You are very, very white.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm like part German, part Norwegian, and all parts nice. So,
Bill, did you say he's part translucent?
That's what I said, yeah.
Guys, I'm in Chicago. The sun hasn't been out in like 6 months, so I'm glad that. So you're saying I'm still here with you.
So you're just being modest about you just kind of pleading ignorance on the racial question, which is fine.
So let's plead ignorance as white people.
By the way, that's a thoughtful goddamn answer. I never give that answer. I always say whatever the hell I want about race.
Well, because I came to my leftist ways through race consciousness before class consciousness. I came from lily white central Illinois, where 99% of the town was white, and that included the federal prison that was in the area. And so, like, it was an interesting place to grow up. And now now I live and work in Chicago, in one of the most multicultural places, even though it's still got its own issues with segregation, massively going on. So, I kind of naively moved up here but way back in the day, hey, I want to move to Chicago, get some culture and do that. And then I realized that there's this class element going on and these things are all interplaying. So to where I would totally agree with Cornell. And I'm sure there's multiple instances out there where, Bernie was lacking in his race analysis, Well,
what I don't understand, Cornell, is Joe Biden, wrote some pretty terrible laws and got behind some pretty racist laws, and has a pretty bad record on race. I mean, I still don't understand. I feel cynically like the reason why black people, especially older black people, support Joe Biden is because he was Barack Obama's vice president, and he had a really good black friend who trusted him.
Real quick, not to interrupt Cornell, but just a shout out to who I left you when you left us, Pete, and who I listened to in the morning. But Joe Madison on
the Eagle,
Urban View,
the Black Eagle, Joe Madison.
Absolutely, I listen every morning. He did a town hall in South Carolina last week. They'll tell you exactly why they're voting for Joe Biden.
What does he say?
Well, it's a town hall.
I got to get him on, man. I used to have so much fun. I should tell you guys some stories about Joe and his wife Sharon. They're great people, but I had a lot of fun with them. All right, Cornell, sorry.
So I'm going to tell you all a secret. I'm going to let you all behind the black curtain. Pun completely intended.
Thank you.
So here's the thing. And this is something that I think, white people in general, I don't care if you're progressive, radical, moderate, or whatever, something that white people in general don't get about black people, even the most progressive black people, is that we have not been rewarded more often than not for taking chances. And so while we may be very progressive, we are not going to be real quick to just jump and follow this hot new thing over here, because we're like, hey, if we're wrong about this, we're going to get knocked down 2 or 3 steps. Whereas the average white person, if they take a chance, they're going to be like, okay, maybe I'll lose a step. So it's like, hey, it was already hard enough for us to get to where we are.
Right, but why is he a chance? That's a really thoughtful thing to think about for everybody, and I appreciate that. But why is Bernie a chance as opposed to Biden.
Okay, wait. Why is Bernie? Okay, so Bernie is talking about one. Bernie has already identified himself, and I'm not saying it's a wrong thing, as a democratic socialist.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to stop and consider what black people hear when they hear democratic socialist. Now, they may not necessarily be, worried about Russians or Marxism or anything like that. Be like, wait, I'm a Democrat. This guy's talking about being a democratic socialist. I don't know necessarily what that socialist word means. I've heard not great things about it, and I don't understand it. So I'm not necessarily going to just jump on that. So just by him calling himself a democratic socialist, that makes him really risky. And then him saying, hey, you know what? We're going to he is in some ways very radical. He is, and that's part of his appeal. Okay, he wants to kind of tear down the system. He wants to try to lift all boats, by tearing down the corruption and the corporate, capitalism and all that. And I get it. And I think there are some real virtues to it, and it's still a real risk. And so when you are a black person, even though you know that some of these systems, a lot of these systems are rigged against you, you still understand them. And so you have an idea of how they work.
The devil you know.
But when you want to tear down all those systems, black people have a hard enough time getting ahead with the systems they somewhat understand. If you want to tear down all these systems and then expect blacks to feel like, okay, we have a chance now, they're like, no. If we don't know the rules, we already in general get screwed. What's going to happen when we don't know the rules?
Yeah, the general distrust amongst African Americans is something that should be thought about a lot more.
So I would push back on that. Sorry, Bill, but just like quickly, and not wanting to let people feel like they're vulnerable, but what movement candidates have been the candidates that have won the last Obama elections, Trump election. It's not been these appeals to the middle. It's been a populist-centered, yes, we can, we the people sort of thing. It's been a movement candidate. It hasn't been this Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, who can reach across the aisle. It's who can really shore up their base and who can firm up their base and then expand, from there. And that's not to say that doesn't if we lose or whatever, but I'm just not I'm not playing from a position of wanting to lose.
Yeah, well, I don't think any of us
not to lose.
I don't think any of us are, but I do feel like right now Bill is on the top rope and Cornell is right there as well, just waiting to pounce on that point.
No, go ahead, Bill, because I've already talked about you.
Go ahead, Bill.
So, Cornell, I think what you're really talking about is privilege, right? And white people have the privilege of taking bigger risks in politics than black people do, because the penalty they pay if they lose is far less. And the poorest white person in rural Ohio has more privilege than many middle-class black people in the city. And that's just the reality. So there's that. And then, it's almost better to get around sort of with Bernie, like to argue whether or not he overemphasizes class relative to race is sort of besides the point. The reality is, whether it's true or not, he's done a fucking awful job of convincing anybody in the black community that I know that that's not true. And so, people in the black community very much think that. And I got to tell you something, Bernie, if they did not think that, Bernie probably would have won South Carolina the other day.
I don't know. I don't think that's fair. I am looking at the 100 plus black writers and scholars endorsing Bernie Sanders. Almost every single, most of the black TV pundits I know are like Elizabeth Warren, by the way.
How many voters do they swing?
Huh?
How many voters do those 100 people swing?
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, you're talking about black people, your black friends in D.C., which matters. I mean, I'm not saying
black voters in general. I mean, Bernie clearly has a reputation with black voters that I hear anecdotally all the time. I'm sure Cornell does as well. And that is borne out in how they vote, right? People are afraid in the black community to vote for Bernie, and they're not, he is a movement candidate, but honestly, he's basically a white movement candidate.
Well, let me say something ignorant.
I don't think that's true at all.
Let me say something ignorant.
That's totally erasing all of the Hispanic folks in Nevada that voted for him.
He did do well.
He can't be doing that.
That's right. So
yeah, right.
correct
So we can't,
that. He is not a black movement candidate for sure.
But
and that might be the case, and you can totally understand why people are with the establishment, from a long-term Democratic point of view. And I don't think black folks, and again, I can't speak for anybody, but they don't hate Bernie. They don't dislike Bernie. They just probably like somebody else more,
Well, how much of it is about Bernie Sanders, Cornell, and how much of it is about not maybe understanding Bernie Sanders' policies? Wouldn't Bernie Sanders' policies, if there were any way they would pass, which are very similar to Elizabeth Warren's policies, wouldn't they be good for most black folks?
Here's the thing. And honestly, it's funny because when I was on your show before, I made this analogy and you're like, wait, let's get away from this. This is getting kind of dark. But part of the issue is when you've got policies like Bernie's that lift all boats. Well, okay, so everybody gets better. Guess who's still on the bottom? Black people. And so while their bottom is higher, and that's great, they're like, well, wait a second. So nothing's really changed. We've just all gotten better, and that's cool. And maybe those people up top are getting a little bit lower.
What are the difference?
But
I hear
all the
you,
rest
but
of
what
us
are the
aren't
difference?
necessarily any better.
What are the difference in policies?
What is Joe Biden saying to that makes you feel that things are going to get better versus what Medicare for all, canceling student debt, all of these things that disproportionately affect, especially younger generations? Like what?
Honestly, here's the thing. I mean, again, I was talking about taking chances. If Bernie could prove in any way, shape, or form that he's going to get this shit done, then blacks would run over to him in a heartbeat. But when you've only gotten 3 bills passed, this is where the whole chance thing comes into it. Black folks are like, wait, you've been in the Senate for 30 years and you've gotten 3 damn bills passed, but now you're talking about trying to get like major revolutionary things done, and not just one, but several things done at the same time when you haven't gotten like any significant bills passed in 30 years. Black folks are like, I don't see how that happens. And
he hasn't had a movement of people
also it's
like ready to come and elect him.
Hold on.
Good though.
Well, I mean, and here's the thing I didn't get to say earlier. To Chum's point about it hasn't been people like Elizabeth Warren that have gotten things done and stuff like that. Sure, maybe modern, but let's also stop and look at the difference between MLK and Malcolm X. Black folks in general, they weren't flocking to Malcolm X. There were a few. But most of them were flocking to MLK because they're like, okay, that MLK is not going to get as many of us killed. That fool over there, he's going to get us mowed down by a bunch of bullets and like sticks.
Because he's got the right, honestly, because he has the right ideas.
And that's great. And the right idea without any idea how to get it done does not work.
Well, but Malcolm X and Fred Hampton, they instituted free breakfast programs in the city, and they were literally building cultural, like, ground up movements, and he was killed. They were killed because of that. Right?
And please understand, I'm not trying to say that Malcolm was wrong and MLK was right. I think they were both right. My point is the black community as a whole looked at, okay, which is likely to make things better and also not get me killed. And they look at Malcolm and they're like, that's going to get me killed. I may believe some of the stuff he's saying, but if I go out there with him, not only am I not going to get that job, or I may lose that job that I already have that doesn't pay me enough, I may die, and I can't afford to die because I've got a family I'm trying to take care of. Whereas MLK may not get as much done, but I'll make some progress, and I'm still going to be on this earth. And so what people see with Biden is that, one, and true or not, they can look at him and say, I believe some of the good things he wants to get done that I agree with. He actually has the ability and the relationships and the actual reputation to get some of those things done. Bernie, as a person who has loved being a loner and loved being, hey, I'm going to fight the power. Like, well, when you fight the power for 30 years and that fighting the power doesn't get anything done, there are ways to fight the power and also not be as I think Pete said earlier, a corporate stooge. John Lewis, any number of people have fought the power and not become a corporate stooge and gotten things moved. Bernie hasn't, and I think that matters. And I think for black people, that matters a lot.
So something also to remember, too, is that in the United States, and it's a truism that weirdly doesn't get very much play, is that the most dedicated and involved voters in the United States are black voters, particularly black women. Yep. So the black community is super, super involved, more than almost any other group in the country in day-to-day politics. So if you want people who are making like really have a lot of agency in how they vote and how they think about politics and who they support, you're talking about the black community are the most in the country. And they are people in black community routinely makes pretty astute choices when who it supports in elections. Hillary Clinton, I was around in 2008, 2007. I remember when Barack Obama first came on the scene, 2006, 2007, and a friend of mine John, who Pete knows, John and I looked at that guy and went, oh shit, this is the guy. And I got to tell you, people thought we were out of our minds. Black community saw Barack Obama, and despite the fact that Hillary Clinton had unbelievable amounts of institutional support, she got swept away because the black community said, nope, this is the phenom, we're choosing this guy. So it is weird to me often that given how vital and how crucial the black vote is in the Democratic Party and in our presidential elections, people generally treat, you hear folks on the left lately saying like the establishment is supporting Biden. That's super bizarre to me because yes, the establishment's sort of supporting Biden to a great degree, but really the people who are actually carrying him on their backs are lower middle class black voters. And if they're the establishment, I got to tell you, they'll be shocked to fucking hear it. It's a very weird thing. Yeah. Poor black people who are really the wind under Biden's wings, and yet everyone's screaming about the establishment, and it's very weird. And I think it's a question again of people of privilege again, that sort of white people must assume that it's some other sort of nebulous group that is making this thing happen with Biden right now, when the reality is it's our most dedicated and strongest part of our party, the black voter in the Mid-Atlantic and the South.
And Pete, it's interesting to the point that you made the last time I was on your show when we talked about what is the working class. It's fascinating that just today, Bernie, when being asked about South Carolina, Bernie said, when I look at South Carolina and I look at where we've been, we are getting most of the working class vote and so on and so forth. And people are like, well, wait a second. You just got killed in South Carolina. Are you trying to say that blacks aren't working class? Because that's most of the people that voted in South Carolina, and they did vote for you in a pretty huge way. What do you have to say about that? And I mean, and here's the thing. This is something that Bill had said earlier. It's not necessarily that black people don't like Bernie, because I don't think they dislike him at all. I think they listen to him. I think they think he has some really good ideas. And yet there's that thing, and I don't know if it is just an ignorance, and I mean ignorance is in like literally just not knowing, not necessarily that he thinks poorly, but there's just a maybe lack of exposure that comes up every so often when Bernie speaks, that you're like, you don't quite get it.
Well, it's not generational, Joe.
And you're around it, but you don't quite get it. And then when he gets called on it, it gets swept on the way as something about establishment, or it's something else. And I think it is that, it's funny, Chum, you actually said earlier, you said, you know what, I'm going to admit there's just some things I don't know. And Pete brought up the point, you know what, that's a fantastic answer. I should say that more. Bernie doesn't say that. Bernie, when it comes to getting called out or getting pointed out, hey, there's this thing over here around race that doesn't seem to quite line up with what you're talking about. He doesn't ever say, you know what, that's a good point. I really need to look at that. He jumps onto, I've been on the right side of this, on the right side of that. It's like, hey, this can only come to you so many times. And have you just keep trying to tell us that we don't know what we're talking about until we get to the point that, okay, you don't know what you're talking about.
See, that's what I think the appeal that, it's, correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I've heard from a lot of the most intelligent, thought-provoking black people who are paying close attention to the election is Elizabeth Warren speaks in such a way, with such a sensitivity and thoughtfulness about race, when frankly nobody else is thinking about it, like, environmental racial justice and other things. She seems to bring it up when it's not even relevant to maybe a question at a debate. What is that about Elizabeth Warren? What is that? How do you describe that quality? Because it would seem that it's a curiosity that she has quenched.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's her recognizing, and I think it is her attempt to call attention to, hey, all these things that we think are about this, we're not seeing the racial components here, and there's a lot of that, and we've been ignoring that in a bunch of these issues, and it's to our own peril, and that's why there are people of color who are not engaged, who are not a part of these things because they know you don't see them in this. And so I'm going to bring them up in this issue that you don't think really is about them, because a lot more often than you realize it is. And so I think it is that situation where it's not the easy pander that's like, we're talking about racism. Let me show how I love black people. It's, hey, I'm going to bring race into this, and you're going to think it's weird, but it's not weird. It's just something you're not used to, and you should get more used to it. It's that ability to go out there on that limb and do it consistently enough where black folks are like, you know what? I mean, if she had done that once in the debate, that might be one thing, but she's done this quite a few times. And not just in debate, she's done it in speeches. Yeah. She's done it in a number of times where, like, okay, this isn't just a pander. This is something she actually cares about and she wants to draw attention to, and that matters.
It's when, there's been a lot of white candidates over the years who have answered racial questions really, really well, but there's not been a lot of white candidates who inserted race when it wasn't being asked about. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
All right.
I completely agree.
My timer's out over here. I'm about to die recording, and you guys probably have a life you want to get back to. So thank you for staying up late with me. Anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get to say before I wrap, Bill?
On Cornell's point about Warren and her discussion of race, and I think he's totally right about it, and I love the way she talks about it. And I have this sort of sneaking suspicion or this feeling in the back of my mind that that's part of the reason that the media kind of froze her out so much in this campaign. And it kind of sucks that I think that, but she just very weirdly got left out of polls, got left out of coverage, and it's very strange to me. It seemed bizarre to me that she did, but it happened, and I have a sneaking feeling that that's part of the reason why.
Anything you wanted to say that you didn't get to say, Chum?
Yeah, I would say that same thing that happened to Elizabeth Warren we saw happen with Bernie. I would say that Elizabeth tanked because she tried to knife Bernie and go after the left and tried to take that center lane, and this whole thing about not taking super PAC money and then having a super PAC is probably going to tank your campaign for people paying attention that think money in politics is the biggest issue out there, probably. Couple quick things. Bernie for human rights, and I know maybe black race relations in America are, iffy for him, but he has had a consistent stance defending U.S. imperialism and those sort of things against our black, brown, whatever color folks all across the world. We've been, he was arrested for protesting desegregation. I'm not here to stand for Bernie, although I just want to say that this is a very nuanced conversation with
could have fooled
how
Bernie.
He's perceived. Huh?
You're standing for Bernie. I hear what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah.
That's fine. It's honest. I appreciate it.
Hashtag Bernie or bust.
Cornell, anything you didn't get to say, pal?
Yeah, all these issues are really important. The one issue that it actually angers me that we just continue to never talk about. Meanwhile, it is at the heart of all of this, and that is it's civic education. The fact that we don't have any real conversation from any candidate at any level about the fact that we as a country tout democracy all over the world. Meanwhile, most people don't really understand what it means and don't really know their place in it and how to actually engage it is an absolute tragedy. And the fact that we don't have more people talking about it and actually having some kind of plan about addressing it is ridiculous.
Which is why, for the one big plug, if you don't mind, Bill and Chum, let's plug Cornell's organization, siriusxm.com. siriusxm.com.
Thanks so much, man. I much appreciate it.
Yeah. Anything you guys wanted to plug now that I won't give as much billing to?
Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast.
Yeah, that's it.
Nice.
Follow him on Patreon.
I don't know what this was, but it was fun and it felt good. And maybe the next time we can talk about our feelings. Boys,
I'm down for that too.
thank you very much.
Lots of feelings.
I'll plug all your stuff on the way out and find
Bye,
a
guys.
for this. Chum, thanks for organizing it and lighting the fire. And you guys have all been really, really good friends to me. Thank you very much. This was fun. I hope you had a good time. We'll do it again.
I'm so glad I could do it, y'all. Have a good one.
Good night, fellas.
Bye-bye.
Good night,
guys. Bye.
All right.
Well, that was a lot of fun for me. I hope you liked it. I hope you like listening, and I hope you will consider supporting the show on Patreon. The show cannot be sustained without Patreon subscriptions. Become a patron. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic or PeteDominic.com, or just click the link in the show notes. Thank you to my excellent guests and all of you for listening for this far. I hope you got a lot out of it, and tell me what more you'd like me to hear. And if you'd like to be a listener and join the conversation, I'd love to have you. Talk to you next time when we have Eddie Gull Jr., Princeton University African American Studies Chair, with an amazing appearance and conversation on Stand Up.